Before the morning court session, the person behind me, holding a sword, had embraced me and lightly kissed my lips. But now, the cold blade was pressed against me, the force increasing. I could even feel my skin being cut, with warm blood trickling down my neck and seeping into my collar. It was all because I had read the diary about Peidu's reincarnation and realized that everything he did for me was just an act. He feared that I would turn my love into hatred and harm Song Yanyu. In the previous life, the original owner of this body had repeatedly tried to harm Song Yanyu out of unrequited love for the male lead. As I was about to turn around, the pain in my neck forced tears into my eyes. Through my blurred vision, I heard Song Yanyu's voice. "Your Majesty, what are you doing? Luo Yu, the Empress only came to chat with me today. She also wanted to return the repaired dagger to me." Song Yanyu pushed Peidu's sword away and hurriedly took out a handkerchief to press against my wound. Peidu, unwilling to hurt Song Yanyu, quickly withdrew his sword. "Luo Yu, does it hurt?" I shook my head at her and handed the dagger to her. "The dagger?" Peidu looked at the dagger in my hand, most of the coldness in his eyes dissipating. "The dagger was originally given to me by Xiao Yan. It got nicked by Jenner the other day. During a palace banquet, I mentioned it to the Empress, and she said the Imperial Craft Bureau had many skilled craftsmen who could repair it easily. So she helped me by giving the dagger to Court Lady Kui." Song Yanyu became more agitated as she spoke. "But Your Majesty, you drew your sword without even knowing the whole story. What do you think of the Empress?" Song Yanyu's words landed between Peidu and me like a clap of thunder. Perhaps in front of the person he loved, Peidu remained silent, even deliberately avoiding her gaze. What did Peidu think of me? A venomous snake by Song Yanyu's side? A wicked woman who clung desperately to Xiao Yan? Or a suspect who attempted murder out of shame and anger? I was never considered his wife anyway. I've been having nightmares recently and accidentally hurt a few people upon waking. His Majesty was just worried I might hurt someone again and acted out of urgency. I'm fine." I gestured for Song Yanyu to let go and smiled to reassure her. Although I said this, my heart had already plunged into an icy abyss. If earlier, upon seeing the diary, I still held a sliver of hope that Peidu might fall in love with me through our daily interactions, now I was left with nothing but despair. Peidu did not speak further, because no matter how one tried to cover this lie, it would always have flaws. Everyone in the Shao residence had seen Peidu injure me with a sword, and surely rumors would spread by tomorrow. The affection between the Emperor and Empress was not as indestructible as rumored. On the contrary, it was on the verge of collapse. And indeed, that was the truth. In the carriage, we remained silent the entire way. Peidu tried several times to check my wound, but I brushed him off each time. The distance from the Shao residence to the palace gates was not far, yet today it felt exceptionally long. Upon reaching the palace gates, I got out of the carriage. "I am injured, so I can't prepare the evening meal today." I bit my lip to keep from crying, but the strong wind today made tears spill as I turned away. In fact, I had already prepared most of the evening meal, just because he had mentioned he wanted to eat something I made personally. I was never skilled in cooking, neither before nor after transmigrating. I wasn't good at cooking, etiquette, palace rules, or managing the various affairs of the palace. I did all this only because Peidu had petitioned the late emperor to marry me, and because the night before the imperial decree of marriage was issued, he climbed over the wall into the Jiang residence and gave me a red sheet of paper with our birth dates written on it, marked with the word auspicious. This was what he had done for Song Yanyu in the novel, but that night, he stood under the moonlight, his gaze falling on me. "Will you marry me?" That night, I thought I saw surging love in Peidu's eyes, until I saw the diary filled with pages of red paper recording his and another person's birth dates. I realized then that what I saw that night was only my own delusion. I couldn't hear what Peidu said behind me. I just wanted to hurry back to my chambers and escape from here. The Empress was injured, and on the neck no less. On the way, every palace person who saluted looked at me sideways. Each gaze seemed to cut me like 1,000 knives. I went to bed early, leaving all the affairs of the harem behind. I had a long dream in which I was the original character, in love with the male lead Xiaoyan since childhood. But Xiaoyan only loved Song Yanyu, never sparing a glance at the original character. Thus, the original character schemed against Song Yanyu in every possible way, nearly causing her death several times. Even after the two got married, she was still not content and schemed to become Xiaoyan's concubine, repeatedly trying to sow discord between them. Like all vicious supporting female characters in abusive novels, the original character's schemes were eventually exposed by the protagonists. However, Song Yanyu was kind-hearted and merely expelled her from the Xiao residence. Yet Pei Du, who loved Song Yanyu but couldn't be with her, did not let me go. In the dream, he still smiled as usual, but his eyes were filled with coldness. Pei Du was skilled with the sword. He first severed my tendons, leaving me to struggle in agony for 3 days before delivering the final blow to my throat. The long sword came straight at me, its gleam blinding, and all that was left was a warm crimson. In the dream, Pei Du was nothing like I remembered, his actions brutal, like a smiling, grim reaper. I jolted awake from the nightmare, reality and the dream scenes interwoven, making it hard to breathe. I felt a coldness at the wound on my neck, and looking up, I met Pei Du's eyes in the darkness. I was instantly wide awake and sat up abruptly, staring at Pei Du. Pei Du saw through my thoughts at a glance, raising his hand to reveal a small white porcelain bottle. He sighed. "This is an ointment tribute from the western regions. Applying it will ensure no scars once the wound heals. There's no need. The palace staff can handle these things, and I can apply the ointment myself." "But you didn't. I heard from Shi Yun that you turned the imperial physician away and didn't eat dinner." In the dim candlelight, I could faintly see a thin layer of ointment on Pei Du's fingertips. I already applied medicine at the Xiao residence, and I don't want to be redundant. Besides, whether I scar or not is unimportant to me. A woman adorns herself for those who delight in her, but I no longer need anyone to delight in me. Pei Du withdrew his hand helplessly. "If you won't use the medicine, you should at least eat something, right?" He lifted the curtain, making the candlelight brighter, and I could faintly smell the familiar scent of osmanthus. It was osmanthus cake and osmanthus wine from the most famous Yipin Lu in the capital. Every time Pei Du and I quarreled, he would use these to appease me. Because he knew, Yipin Lu was where I fell in love with him. My transmigration wasn't accidental. It came with a mission. In this abusive novel, Song Yanyu was tormented both physically and emotionally, and the deliberately melodramatic plot was resisted by readers. I was sent to turn her tragic love story into a sweet romance. Song Yanyu would accidentally consume a drugged tea at Yipin Lu, nearly losing her chastity. Though she retained her purity, misunderstandings arose between her and Xiaoyan, causing him to leave for the border, leaving her to endure rumors alone in the capital. At that time, I didn't know Pei Du was also secretly helping Song Yanyu. So I pretended to converse with Song Yanyu, secretly switching her teacup. Meanwhile, Pei Du had already driven away the lecher in the room, waiting to rescue the unconscious Song Yanyu. Unfortunately, the plan was exposed the moment I replaced Song Yanyu and entered the room. Fearing their scheme would be revealed, the mastermind decided to kill me to silence me. I turned and faced a blade, but a strong hand grabbed my waist, spinning me around. My clothes were torn, warm blood splattered on my face. Unexpectedly, when our eyes met, I saw Pei Du's eyes. I looked at the gash in his flesh and couldn't help but cry out. My heart raced. "Why is your highness here?" Perhaps I was too panicked then to notice the same surprise in Pei Du's eyes. "Of course, I'm here to find you." Before he finished speaking, Pei Du had already pushed me away, plunging into the fight alone. Before this, I had met Pei Du several times, whether at family banquets or hunting trips outside the palace. Each time he would say, "Miss Jiang, what a coincidence," and then stay close, talking to me until the gathering ended. That day in Yipin Lu, countless memories surged. The person in front of me was injured fighting for me. Perhaps in these long years of transmigration, I had grown weary of loneliness, or maybe the danger made me confused between fear and affection. But I did fall in love with Pei Du, mistakenly believing those encounters were deliberate on his part, that he genuinely came to find me that day in Yipin Lu, that he truly wanted to shield me from the blade. But in the end, it was merely my wishful thinking. The moment I fell for him was nothing but a lie. The one he risked his life to save was never me. In truth, I don't like osmanthus. That day at Yeep and Lou, I didn't go there to eat osmanthus cake. My thoughts drifted away as I calmly replied to him. Claiming to go for osmanthus cake was just a lie to cover for the original character's preference for osmanthus, to fool Peidu. I grew to like osmanthus because I fell in love with Peidu. I just didn't expect that. We both lied that day. I saw the surprise spreading in Peidu's eyes as he looked at me with a puzzled expression. That day, my purpose was actually the same as yours, to save Yan Yu. It was Jiang Luoyu who liked osmanthus, but I am not the real Jiang Luoyu. Peidu frowned but spoke in a relieved tone. You don't have to say this. If you aren't Jiang Luoyu, then who is? I realized immediately that he thought I was just sulking and that my words were merely out of anger. I indeed acted impulsively today. Your Majesty, that's not what I meant. Jiang Luoyu died long ago. I intentionally switched the drug tea that day at Yeep and Lou. I interrupted him. You always have a good memory, so you should know that in the previous life, I wasn't at Yeep and Lou that day, and I wasn't the mastermind behind it. In the previous life, this October, Xiao Yan went to war and was ambushed by the enemy, leaving his whereabouts unknown. Yan Yu, ignoring the dangers, left the capital, only to encounter the plague in City Ye and was almost burned alive. Luckily, Your Majesty went to save her. I met Peidu's gaze and slowly said, word by word, am I right, Your Majesty? I could clearly feel Peidu's grip on my wrist tightening, though it didn't hurt. Yet, I still shed tears. Peidu's eyes said it all. He now knew I wasn't Jiang Luoyu. In the previous life, Peidu had left the capital in secret for Song Yanyu, abandoning all his duties and risking his life to enter City Ye. And this was something the real Jiang Luoyu wouldn't know even if she were reincarnated, but I knew. When I read about this part, I couldn't help but cry for Peidu, but until the end, despite giving everything, he never won Song Yanyu's heart. In the previous life, Peidu's love was unrequited, and now, so is mine. He remained as devoted as ever, only his misplaced affection now included me. Then why did you go to the Shao residence today? Peidu looked at me, his eyes still filled with doubt. I laughed, tears falling. He still didn't trust me. He thought I would harm Song Yanyu. To return the dagger and remind her to warn Xiao Yan of the enemy ambush. Yan Yu's maid was also there. She can testify for me. The image of Peidu before me grew blurry, and for some reason, my heart ached with a dull pain. It turned out that even between a husband and wife who faced each other every day, there could be no trust at all. Peidu looked puzzled. You read my diary? Don't you have any questions for me? I do. I wiped away my tears forcefully and met his gaze. I hated myself for understanding Peidu so well, knowing exactly what he was feeling at this moment. Although he appeared calm, his earlier doubts had already vanished. At this moment, Peidu wore an expression that suggested he had seen through everything. But this calmness turned into panic and helplessness as soon as I spoke. Your Majesty, may we divorce? Divorce? Peidu's eyebrows raised slightly, his tone filled with incredulity. That's right. Since Your Majesty knows I am not Jiang Luoyu and have no intention of harming Yan Yu, there's no need to keep me by your side, is there? I tried to maintain a calm exterior, despite the turmoil inside me. Having seen the diary, with his familiar handwriting filled with deep affection for Song Yanyu, what else could I possibly ask? Ask if he ever loved me? Even just a little. The sword at my neck earlier in the day had already answered that question. Peidu asking if I had any questions was just another way of breaking my heart. Yes, I was in love but unable to attain it, yet I did not want to be an unreasonable villain. The Empress is the mother of the nation. If you and I were to divorce rashly, both the ministers and the people would find it absurd. Not to mention me, the ministers would never agree. Peidu quickly regained his composure. Furthermore, what do you plan to do after the divorce? Do you think rumors would spare you? Peidu sighed. He wanted to call me by my name, Luo Yu, but silently corrected himself. Empress, you are too naive. You should know that after the divorce, the Zhang family would not take you in. In the capital, wherever you go, people would gossip. If you leave the capital, as a woman without the title of Empress or the status of the Zhang family's legitimate daughter, you would have no place to go. Peidu spoke as if educating a child throwing a tantrum. He remained calm and composed, as he did most of the time. He was nonchalant, unhurried, and certain. Every word made sense, and none touched on emotions. Perhaps it was because he never had any feelings for me. His words appeared to be advice, but between the lines, they were all threats. Indeed, it would be hard for me to survive after divorcing him. But what about him? Wouldn't there be disadvantages for him as well? In the eyes of the people, Peidu and I were childhood sweethearts, loving and harmonious. To the ministers, I was a competent empress who managed the harem impeccably, never making a misstep in my conduct. If the emperor and empress were to divorce, it would provoke much speculation and could shatter the people's image of Peidu as a ruler. More importantly, it would disrupt the balance between the court and the harem that had been maintained for years. With the empress's position vacant, the ministers would undoubtedly take the opportunity to fill the harem with concubines. Peidu disliked being controlled, and I was his shield against other women. In the palace, you live in luxury, and with the harem empty, you need not worry about schemes and intrigues. My mother passed away early, so you need not fear the Empress Dowager. The court has no complaints against you either. Peidu continued, seeing my silence. I will treat you as I always have. He held my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine, just like on countless intimate nights. It was like a negotiation table, where both sides added stakes due to a lack of consensus. I quickly withdrew my hand. Perhaps when I first saw the diary, I might have believed Peidu's words had some sincerity. But now, I truly couldn't see the man in front of me clearly. I didn't marry Peidu for the riches and luxury of the royal family, nor for power. I married him because I genuinely loved him. The plot focused solely on Xiao Yan and Song Yanyu. The higher-ups would not concern themselves with matters such as Peidu's emotional changes. But on the day I decided to marry Peidu, my superiors had earnestly advised me, if marrying Peidu is to use his power to help with the plot, you are correct. But if you truly want to stay here, I hope you reconsider this relationship. Many who undertake missions cannot help but develop feelings. However, a moment of passion may lead them to overlook the ideological differences brought by different eras and ignore the true nature of the characters. Their words echoed in my mind again, but I had stubbornly persisted at that time. Is that so? I tried hard to hold back my tears. But Your Majesty, after saying so much, you still haven't asked my name. In the end, Peidu didn't care who I was. Upon learning that I wasn't Zhang Luoyu and posed no threat to Song Yanyu, he only needed a competent empress, nothing more. Peidu's mask was peeled away by my revelation, and he remained silent. I understand Your Majesty's words. Does this mean that as long as I fulfill my duties as empress, I will continue to have control over the harem? I broke the silence, and a flash of surprise crossed Peidu's eyes. He probably hadn't expected me to adapt so quickly. Naturally. Peidu responded swiftly. It's getting late, and I'm tired. I won't see you off. I had effectively dismissed him before I finished speaking, which seemed to catch Peidu even more off guard than my previous statement. All right. Peidu nodded somewhat awkwardly and placed the medicine bottle in my hand before leaving. Remember to apply the ointment. As the door closed, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I had imagined many scenarios of revealing my true identity to Peidu, but never like this. Or perhaps I had never imagined that he wouldn't love me. From Peidu's attitude, it was clear that divorce was impossible. As long as I remained in Zhang Luoyu's body, I would be the empress. But there were many ways to not be the empress. Leaving the palace and living incognito was easy for me. After all, I hadn't lived through all these years for nothing. The difficult part was ensuring that the people around me wouldn't be implicated. Your Majesty, I heard that this was specially brought from Yipin Lu by order of the Emperor. You know, once the palace gates are locked, they won't open until sunrise. Xian approached, implying that Peidu had broken the rules for me. But I really have no appetite. I shook my head. Throw it all away. The scent of osmanthus gives me a headache. Understood, Xian replied reluctantly. Xian, I called her back. How old are you this year? Your Majesty, I am 24. Xian answered, somewhat surprised. I then remembered that Xian had been a childhood companion of the original Zhang Luoyu. Madame Zhang had bought her because she was older and could take care of Zhang Luoyu. Xian was steady and careful, following me from the Jiang family to the prince's residence, and then to the palace. In the blink of an eye, she was nearing the age to leave the palace. "You'll be 25 next year. Have you thought about leaving the palace early?" I asked her. Shi Yun's expression changed drastically, and she immediately knelt before me. "Your Majesty, are you dismissing me?" "I just think that it's only a year left. Leaving the palace early might be better." I helped her up with a smile. "You've been stuck with me for so long. It's time for you to see the world outside. But I want to stay by your Majesty's side forever." Shi Yun said, her eyes welling up with tears. "How can I be so selfish as to keep you by my side forever?" I shook my head and smiled gently. In the days that followed, I avoided Pei-du, and fortunately, he also had the tacit understanding not to bother me. However, I noticed that the decoction from the imperial physicians had changed. I hadn't been suspicious before, but sure enough, when I had Shi Yun examine the medicine dregs, the recent prescriptions turned out to be genuinely nourishing and beneficial for women's health and fertility. As for what the previous prescriptions were, I had no way of knowing, nor did I care to investigate further. These matters no longer concerned me. In fact, I should thank Pei-du. Not having children over these years meant one less tie when I eventually left. Until that day, when my brother found out that Pei-du had held a sword to my neck at the Shao residence. When a palace servant came to inform me, I was considering what dowry to prepare for Shi Yun. Hearing the words, "The imperial brother-in-law struck the emperor," I hurried to the imperial study. The original Zhang Luoyu's elder brother, Zhang Huaiji, wielded great power and was Pei-du's greatest support in ascending to the throne. In the novel, Zhang Huaiji doted on Zhang Luoyu, which was why she could act so arrogantly in the capital, even forcing Xiaoyan into marriage. Even though Zhang Luoyu was eventually killed by Pei-du, it was after Zhang Huaiji's fall, leaving Pei-du with no opposition in court. In this life, I married Pei-du, and Zhang Huaiji also wholeheartedly assisted him. When I arrived, Pei-du and my brother were already fighting, Pei-du's mouth bruised. Seeing the scar on my neck only fueled Zhang Huaiji's rage. Luoyu fears pain the most. "Do you know, she suffered from dampness in her knees every winter because of you? I invited all the famous doctors in the world to nurse her back to health for several years before she recovered. And now you have injured her again?" "Lord Jiang, you must be confused. I have no recollection of this matter," Pei-du responded indifferently. "That day, I misunderstood the Empress. It was merely an accidental injury." Despite being struck, Pei-du remained calm. My brother sneered. "You really don't know? On the 5th of November in the 25th year of Jianan, the deposed crown prince schemed to trap you in the snow mountains and frame the remnants of the previous dynasty." "Enough, brother. Say no more," I interrupted him, trying to stop his words. Indeed, on the 5th of November in the 25th year of Jianan, I encountered Pei-du, who was being pursued. He was temporarily blinded by poison in his eyes. But that day, I didn't go up the mountain for Pei-du. I received a notification that a deviation from the plot involving the protagonists had occurred. At that time, I was solely focused on the protagonists, not noticing anything unusual about the rapid rise of Pei-du. In the original plot, the assassination attempt on Pei-du by the former crown prince didn't occur in the 25th year of Jianan, nor in the snow mountains. My mission that day was to help Song Yanyu and Xiaoyan out of the snow forest. Otherwise, the plot might have turned into a double death scenario. I left markers along the patrol routes of the soldiers, secretly guiding them to Song Yanyu and Xiaoyan. After that, I chose another path to descend the mountain. My presence could not be explained, so I had to do my best to avoid them. I could have safely descended alone, but I encountered Pei-du, the one who had saved me at Yipinlu and deceived me into believing he was there for me. Leaving with the bloodied Pei-du was not easy, with snow ahead and pursuers behind. Pei-du was much taller than me, and as I supported him down the mountain, each step had to be deeply pressed into the snow. The snow reached up to my knees, and the cold penetrated to the bone, which led to the old ailment my brother mentioned recurring every winter. Pei-du, suffering from a high fever due to the poison, remained unconscious throughout. At that time, I was relieved. As a noble lady, my presence far from the capital would be hard to justify to Pei-du. Besides, I didn't want Peidu to have any suspicions about me. As for now, telling Peidu about this would undoubtedly be like reopening an old wound. I didn't know how Jiang Huaiji found out I had saved Peidu. Perhaps he noticed I had fallen in love with Peidu sooner than I did. My leg ailment was from playing in the snow too long. I lied at the time to avoid being scolded by you, brother. Please don't cause any more trouble. I hurriedly pulled Jiang Huaiji away, not forgetting to bow to Peidu as we left. My brother acted impulsively out of concern for me. Please do not blame him, Your Majesty. If punishment is necessary, let it fall on me. As I hastily turned back, I caught a glimpse of Peidu's furrowed brow. Whether it was confusion or disgust, I no longer cared to guess. As I pulled my brother out of the imperial study, he was still seething with anger. In the novel, Jiang Huaiji was the same way. When it came to matters involving Jiang Ruoyu, he always became agitated. During the past 20 years since I arrived here, he had pampered and protected me, shielding me from most of life's storms. In my heart, he was like my true elder brother, and I didn't want anything to happen to him. Peidu didn't know all these years? He asked me. I already told you, it was because I was being playful. What kind of snow do you have to go so far to play in? Do you think I don't know the truth? Jiang Huaiji's questioning left me speechless. I just felt it wasn't necessary to tell him. When I thought Peidu loved me, I didn't want to speak out and be doubted. When I found out he didn't love me, saying these things would only be self-humiliating. Jiang Huaiqi sighed. Then how did you get that injury on your neck? The emperor mistook me for someone else and accidentally hurt me. Brother, you don't need to worry about it. According to the novel's plot, Peidu had already started dismantling Jiang Huaiji's power in the court. Although I had always tried to maintain a balance between them, I feared that my brother's actions today would disrupt this balance. Really? Jiang Huaiji didn't believe me. Really? Jiang Huaiji sighed again, shaking his head. If you're unhappy, just tell me. Before he could finish, I hugged him with tears in my eyes. All right, brother, please remember not to act so impulsively in the future. After all, you are a minister, and he is the emperor. If he ever punishes you, what would happen to sister-in-law and my nieces and nephews? Also, the emperor may have seemed gentle and easy to control on the surface, but he was actually very suspicious and disliked being controlled. The court had always been wary of any single faction becoming too powerful. Now that Xiaoyan had achieved outstanding military merits, you must not make enemies with the Xiao family, no matter how much you look down on them. Jiang Huaiji laughed. Why are you more long-winded than me today, as if we siblings will never see each other again? After all, I'm the empress now. It's inconvenient to leave the palace often, and we see each other less. I just wanted to remind you of a few things. Are you annoyed with me? I pretended to be angry and asked him, how could I dare find the empress's words bothersome? He teased me. After sending off my brother, Peidu sent a messenger saying he would dine with me tonight. When Peidu arrived that evening, he brought a sachet with him. I recognized this sachet as one that Song Yanyu had given me before. Why is Your Majesty carrying Yanyu's sachet? This was left by the person who brought me down the mountain back then. Peidu threw the sachet in front of me. Why did you lie to me? Memories surged into my mind. After descending the mountain and coincidentally encountering Song Yanyu leading troops, I had left Peidu by the roadside. No wonder he mistook the person who saved him. I already explained, I lied to my brother about playing in the snow. I couldn't understand why Peidu was still fixated on this. My brother didn't intend to deceive Your Majesty. I also said that if a punishment is needed, it should fall on me. Peidu, very angry, grabbed my hand tightly. Do you really take me for a fool? I asked Yanyu. You two exchanged sachets that year. I froze. It was true that Song Yanyu and I exchanged sachets that year. In the novel, before marrying Xiaoyan, Song Yanyu was a female general. During that year, she was bitten by a poisonous snake while on duty, and I had placed a repellent sachet in the one I exchanged with her. Your Majesty already knows my identity and background. I went to the mountain to save Yanyu and just happened to run into you. I couldn't understand why Peidu was questioning me. You never mentioned this to me before. Even now, you won't admit it. Why? The pressure on my wrist increased, and I looked up to meet Peidu's obsessive gaze. I sneered, because I found it unnecessary and meaningless now. Would confessing this change your Majesty's mind? I know my place and won't humiliate myself repeatedly. I tried to pry his fingers off my wrist, but it was futile. That's not what I meant, Peidu said helplessly. I just wanted to ask. He stopped, perhaps realizing why I didn't want to talk about it. Forget it, I understand now. Peidu released my hand and sat down to start eating. I rubbed my reddened wrist and silently looked away. Is tonight's meal prepared by the Imperial Kitchen? Peidu asked after taking a single bite, as if trying to break the silence. Yes, Your Majesty. Lately, the affairs in the harem have kept me busy, so the recent meals have been prepared by the Imperial Kitchen. Compared to your cooking, it falls quite short, Peidu said, though I couldn't tell if he was sincere or trying to flatter me. I learned my cooking skills from the Imperial Kitchen as well. There's no difference in taste. Empress, you haven't referred to yourself as Chen Qi, one in front of me for a long time. Peidu put down his chopsticks and looked at me. I hadn't even noticed my own behavior until he mentioned it. Is Your Majesty here to accuse me of a crime? If you want to punish me, just find any excuse. There's no need for this. I never intended to punish you. I just want things to be like they were before. Empress, that day you asked me why I never asked your real name. It's because I thought those things weren't important. But today's events have made me want to know everything about you. I want to know your real name, birth date, likes, and the place where you lived before you came here. Peidu's tone was solemn and serious, but I no longer felt any bit of emotion in my heart. Was his change because he knew about my act of saving his life, or did he feel guilty for misunderstanding me before? It didn't matter anymore, because according to the instructions from the higher-ups, I only had one more scene left in my task. After the timeline mentioned in the book ended, I could leave safely. Your Majesty only needs an empress. As long as this body is still Zhang Luoyu's, that is enough, isn't it? I asked with a smile. Empress, I know I hurt you before, and now I just want to make amends. Do we have to live like this for the rest of our lives? If Your Majesty finds my presence dull and boring, I can select some ladies from noble families. Enough, Peidu interrupted me. You know what I mean. Peidu stood up. I know you're still angry. I'll come to see you again tomorrow. After Peidu left, Shiyun hurried in. Your Majesty, did you argue with the Emperor? His face didn't look good when he left. Don't worry about it. Just continue eating, I said, placing food in my bowl. When my brother mentioned my saving Peidu from the mountain, even though I lied to cover it up, Peidu didn't believe me. He became suspicious, suspecting that the person who saved him was me and not Song Yanyu. But instead of asking me directly, he went to Song Yanyu for confirmation. Peidu had the answers to many things in his heart, but he instinctively didn't want to believe that those answers involved me. I once thought that there was absolute trust between Peidu and me, but as our secrets gradually exposed, I realized we had never fully trusted each other. I didn't want to spend the rest of my days living under constant suspicion and self-justification, so our relationship could only end here. The mission notification from the higher-ups was delayed, while Peidu began to show all kinds of kindness. The morning after our dinner together, Peidu had someone send me his diary. Just like when I discovered it earlier, inside it was a piece of bright red thin paper filled with the birth dates of him and Song Yanyu. The diary was placed in a wooden box, and the palace servant who brought it said that Peidu wanted me to handle both the diary and the thin paper as I wished. Peidu started to frequent my palace fengshi even more than before. He didn't do much, he just liked being with me. He no longer reviewed memorials in the imperial study. Instead, he had them moved here, and we had all 3 meals together here. He still complained that the imperial kitchen's cooking didn't compare to mine, but was considerate enough not to force me to cook, saying I could do it whenever I wanted. Even when I neglected harem affairs, he didn't show the slightest displeasure. According to Shiyun, when he reviewed the memorials here with me, he also handled those matters on my behalf. The 5th of October was the original Zhang Luoyu's birthday. In previous years, Peidu would host grand palace banquets, but not this year. He He didn't allow anyone to mention it because he knew I wasn't Zhang Luo Yu. In our daily conversations, he would try to find out my birth date, my name, and everything about me. Every time he hit a wall, he would sigh helplessly, "Empress, I just want to know you." Peidu was very accommodating these days. When I asked to let Shiyun leave the palace a year early, he agreed. I said I hoped my brother could return to our ancestral home and live peacefully in the future, and he agreed. That very day, he bestowed upon my brother an imperial pardon token. But Peidu didn't just agree to everything, like letting me leave the palace. Previously, Peidu allowed me to come and go freely, but since the day I mentioned divorce, the palace gates no longer opened for me. The guards outside Palace Fengshi increased, and their shifts became shorter. He wanted to lock me here, using the palace gates to confine the rest of my life. But Peidu forgot that this wasn't my only way to leave if I wanted. Peidu knew that Xiaoyan would be assassinated by enemy forces in October, so he sent a secret letter to Xiaoyan to change his strategy. As for the plague, he had already replaced the officials in City Ye, nipping the plague in the bud. But no matter how Peidu disrupted the plot, this was still a book, and before the final conclusion, the protagonist always had to endure another trial. I noticed that Peidu didn't come to Palace Fengshi for dinner that day, saying he was tied up with matters from the court session. Taking advantage of my rare free time, I went to the Bureau of Court Ladies. I could use palace affairs as an excuse to stay there and avoid Peidu until nightfall. But today, I went to the Bureau of Court Ladies because I received a reminder from the higher-ups. Today, Song Yanyu would be abducted, and the mastermind would also send someone to kidnap me. I needed to ensure that I stayed with Song Yanyu to have a chance to save her. As expected, when I arrived at the Bureau of Court Ladies, the one who served me tea was a maid I had never seen before. Just as I pretended to drink the tea, Court Lady Kui arrived. "Who told you to presumptuously serve tea to the Empress? The Empress doesn't like Longjing. Don't try to be clever." Court Lady Kui scolded harshly, causing the unfamiliar maid to kneel hurriedly. "Hurry and leave." Court Lady Kui glared at her, and the maid left in a hurry. I wanted to stop her, but feared alarming the enemy. I could only wait until I had dealt with Court Lady Kui. "Your Majesty," Court Lady Kui smiled at me. "Have some tea." My mind was on the maid outside, so I drank cup after cup to calm my nerves, until I felt dizzy. I looked up suddenly, only to see Court Lady Kui smiling at me. Not the usual flattering smile, but the smile of a hunter looking at its prey. So it was her. The unfamiliar maid was just a distraction to make me drink the drugged tea prepared by Court Lady Kui. But the book never mentioned Court Lady Kui. Why? I couldn't finish my question as my eyes closed involuntarily. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a dilapidated house with Song Yanyu still unconscious beside me. My mouth was gagged with coarse cloth, making the corners of my mouth sore, and my hands and feet were tied with hemp rope. My clothes had been changed, probably because my original outfit was too cumbersome to transport me in. As I was assessing how to use the surroundings to cut the ropes, the door opened. Court Lady Kui and that unfamiliar palace maid entered, both now dressed in black. Seeing that Song Yanyu hadn't woken up, Court Lady Kui signaled to the maid. Immediately, a bucket of cold water was splashed onto Song Yanyu. It was the dead of winter, and even the little water that splashed on me made me shiver uncontrollably. Song Yanyu looked at the two of them angrily, only able to make muffled sounds of rage. Court Lady Kui removed the cloth from our mouths. "This place has been abandoned for many years, and the accommodations are poor. I hope the Empress and the General's wife can understand. This is the Prince Zhao residence in the south of the capital. Court Lady Kui brought us here. How can you say the accommodations are poor?" I remembered that before the conclusion of the book, Song Yanyu was kidnapped by the remnants of the previous dynasty and held captive in the decaying Prince Zhao residence. Prince Zhao, She Chao, was a king of the previous dynasty who was confined here after the kingdom was destroyed. Unwilling to accept his fate, he secretly gathered troops to try and restore his kingdom. When the plan was exposed, he fled far away. In the 25th year of Jianan, Peidu and Xiaoyan led troops to annihilate the entire Prince Zhao's clan. In the original plot, Peidu did not go, and Xiaoyan led the troops alone. The leader of the remnants, Szechuan, did not die. Later, he plotted revenge against Xiaoyan by kidnapping Song Yanyu and Zhang Luoyu, who had forced her way into becoming Xiaoyan's concubine. Szechuan brought Song Yanyu and Zhang Luoyu to Prince Zhao residence, forcing Xiaoyan to choose between them. At that time, Zhang Luoyu used Zhang Huaiji to pressure Xiaoyan, endangering Song Yanyu's life. In this life, Pei Du knew the future and had already burned the Xie clan's hiding place, leaving no survivors. Pei Du was impeached by the ministers for this, but the former emperor approved of eliminating the remnants, so Pei Du was not held accountable. Seeing Court Lady Kui's expression, I knew I was right. If the Xie clan's hiding place had been slaughtered, Court Lady Kui and the other women must be spies placed in the palace by the Xie clan. The book only mentioned that Szechuan and his subordinates kidnapped Song Yanyu and Zhang Luoyu without specifying the details. Court Lady Kui and others were likely part of that group at the time. In this life, Szechuan was dead, and Court Lady Kui continued his revenge plan. Indeed, nothing can be hidden from you, Your Majesty. Eradicating the Xie clan has nothing to do with the Empress. Do not drag her into this. The Empress is the mother of the nation. If you harm her, do you think the Emperor will spare you? Song Yanyu said. Ha ha ha. Court Lady Kui slapped Song Yanyu. So noisy. If Pei Du didn't care about her, why would I go to such lengths to bring her here? Court Lady Kui grabbed Song Yanyu's chin. Tell me, if I make them choose only one to live, who will they choose? One is the Empress, the other is the General's wife. Do you think Pei Du and Xiaoyan will turn against each other over your lives? Song Yanyu and I exchanged fearful glances, realizing this was Court Lady Kui's true intention. But your plan is flawed, I said slowly. Neither Xiaoyan nor Pei Du loves me, so they will both choose me to die. Luoyu, what are you saying? Song Yanyu didn't understand. Song Yanyu, stop acting. You saw Pei Du's sword at my neck that day. It was because he thought I knew he always loved you and feared I would harm you. As I spoke, I tilted my head, showing the faint scar on my neck. Luoyu. Song Yanyu's eyebrows furrowed, tears welling up in her eyes, with just a few words. You know, what I hate most is that pitiful, innocent look of yours. It makes me sick. I coldly mocked her. Kill Song Yanyu if you must. Let me go. And I won't say a word about you. Because like you, I want to see Pei Du suffer, to kill the one he loves most. Ignoring Song Yanyu's tears, I spoke to Court Lady Kui. Court Lady Kui didn't respond, merely signaled the maid to gag us again before leaving. After hearing their footsteps fade away, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although Court Lady Kui didn't speak, she knew a lot of information within the palace, and my words should have convinced her. The house was in ruins, and I used the broken furniture to cut the ropes on my hands. The rough hemp rope cut into my wrists, leaving them bloody and raw, but I couldn't worry about that. I had to save Song Yanyu. Once free, I quickly untied Song Yanyu. Luoyu, believe me, You never had feelings for Pei Du, I know. It had always been Pei Du's one-sided affection. I understood that clearly. I met Song Yanyu's surprised gaze and said, I said that just now to save you. I don't care who Pei Du has in his heart. Song Yanyu breathed a sigh of relief at my words. That's good. When they get tired late at night and their guard is down, we'll escape. I nodded. Before that, switch clothes with me. I began to undress. Song Yanyu seemed to understand my plan and shook her head vehemently. Luoyu, we should leave together. What you're planning is too dangerous. You want to make Court Lady Kui believe that Xiaoyan and Pei Du care most about me, then wear my clothes to divert their attention. Doing this could get you killed. She tried to grab my hand but retracted, worried about my injuries. It's better than us both dying. You leave first, and then have Pei Du come to rescue me. That way, we both live. Luoyu, Pei Du does care about you. You don't have to do so much for me. Song Yanyu persisted. Yanyu, I took her hand. I've told you, Pei Du's feelings don't matter to me. I care about you. I came here to save you. Do you remember when you fell into the water at the age of 12? Someone saved you and spared you from embarrassment. And the sachet? You think it was coincidence the herbs inside repelled snakes and insects? And the year you and Xiaoyan got lost in the snow mountains, and patrol soldiers conveniently found your dropped items. Do you really believe it was just luck? I told Song Yanyu everything I had done for her over the years. After hearing it, she was unable to recover from the shock for a long time. It was you all along? Yes, it was me. The real Zhang Luoyu died long ago. I came here specifically to save you. If you die, everything I've done will be for nothing. But I can't just watch you die. You've done so much for me. Can't it be my turn this time? Song Yanyu shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Silly girl, if I die, I'll just return to where I belong. As long as you survive, I can go home. I gently wiped her tears. Really? Really? I'll even be able to see how many brothers and sisters you and Xiaoyan give Jenner in that world. Lo Yu, no, what should I call you now? My name is Zhuang Qing. Unlike when Peidu asked, I genuinely wanted to tell Yanyu my name. In this world, Jiang Huaiji protected me because I was in Zhang Luoyu's body, carrying the Jiang family's blood. Peidu married me because he believed I was the evil Zhang Luoyu from the previous life. Only Song Yanyu cared about me for who I truly was. Zhuang Qing, thank you. Song Yanyu hugged me. All right, let's switch clothes and get you out of here. Otherwise, there won't be any hugs in the future. Court Lady Kui didn't have many subordinates, so Song Yanyu and I seized the opportunity during a guard shift change to escape from the small house where we were held. The Prince Zhao residence had been abandoned for years, and neither of us knew the way out. Song Yanyu, skilled in light footwork, carried me to the rooftop to observe the residence's layout. However, we were both injured, and the roof tiles of the residence were loose. As we moved, we inadvertently triggered the sound of breaking tiles, exposing us in the dark night. In our panic, we fled haphazardly. Court Lady Kui and the other remnants from the previous dynasty were as skilled as Song Yanyu. I handed her a smoke bomb hidden in my shoe. I had suggested to Pei Du to have the Ministry of Works create these, and I had concealed it inside my clothes today. Fortunately, Court Lady Kui had only changed my complicated outer robe, leaving my inner garments untouched. We should split up. Set this off once you're far enough away. Xiaoyan and Pei Du are likely searching for us. Pei Du will understand when he sees it. What about you? Song Yanyu grabbed my sleeve. I'll wait here for you to bring them back to rescue me. I pried her fingers away, smiling calmly. After we separated, as expected, Court Lady Kui mistook me for Song Yanyu and sent most of her men after me. At first, I managed to delay them. But due to excessive blood loss, I gradually grew weaker and slower. A burst of light shot up into the sky, exploding into brilliant fireworks in the dark night. I sighed in relief. Song Yanyu should be safe now. But Court Lady Kui and her men were still pursuing me relentlessly, and I felt my strength ebbing away with each passing moment. I could hear the whistle of arrows flying towards me, but I couldn't outrun them. As an arrow pierced through my chest, I felt myself being caught by strong arms, falling into a warm embrace. Familiar, yet unfamiliar. I looked up and saw Pei Du. I had rarely seen Pei Du cry. His emotions were always steady, but now tears were streaming from his eyes, dripping onto the back of my hand. Your Majesty! I choked out through the blood rising in my throat, my voice barely audible. Is Yanyu? Is she safe? She's safe. What about you? I swallowed the blood and forced a smile. I'm so tired. I just want to sleep. Pei Du's guards surged past us, attacking Court Lady Kui and her men. Amidst the clash of swords, I saw Pei Du's eyes, bloodshot with my blood. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the lab pod. A reassuring voice from above spoke. Zhuang Qing, congratulations on completing your mission. The bonus has been credited to your account. From today, you are officially retired. A colleague handed me a book. The title remained the same, but it had transformed from an abusive story into a sweet romance. In it, I saw the ending for Xiaoyan and Song Yanyu. They had another child, a daughter named Xiao Nianqing. Every year on that day, they would bring Jenner and Nianqing to visit me. By the way, the book mentioned that Xiaoyan and Zhang Huaiqi jointly petitioned to have Pei Du depose me, preventing me from being buried in the imperial mausoleum. Yanyu said, this was the resting place I had wanted. She always understood me best. The last part of the book was an epilogue about Pei Du, but I closed the book without reading it. Not going to read it? My colleague asked. I shook my head. No, it's irrelevant to me now. Perhaps it detailed Pei Du finding a new love, or maybe it chronicled him spending the rest of his life mourning me, but none of that mattered anymore. Just as I told Song Yanyu in the end, I did not care about pay due. What I cared about was her. She had been my close friend who had shared 20 years of my transmigration with me. In this world, I retired honorably, with a substantial bonus ensuring a worry-free life. Why let a chapter from the mission affect my peace of mind? Everything from that world was finished for me, but my life in this world still had a long way to go. Rather than lingering in the past, it's better to look forward and move on. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. It brings me inspiration to create more interesting stories.